Welcome to Marple Whispers. I'm Sean, and together we'll follow threads of lies, half-truths, and secrets too dangerous to speak aloud. Sit back, stay sharp, and let's see who really holds the winning card. In the quiet village of St. Mary Mead, a chilling mystery unfolds as the Tuesday night club gathers to unravel a deadly puzzle. A wealthy woman, Mrs. Eleanor Rhodes, collapses after a curry dinner, poisoned in her own elegant dining room. Suspicion falls on her charming but debt-ridden husband, Charles, with whispers of a mistress and a threatened fortune. As Miss Jane Marple, the sharp-eyed spinster, knits and listens, secrets unravel. A loyal cook's absence, a nervous maid's silence, a gardener's shadowy basket, and a garden hiding deadly secrets. In just one evening, a single dish, and a pinch of poison, the truth lies buried. Chapter 1. The Gathering at St. Mary Mead. The autumn evening draped St. Mary Mead in a gentle chill, the kind that coaxed villagers to draw their curtains early and stoke their fires. In the modest, rose-covered cottage of Miss Jane Marple, a soft glow spilled from the drawing-room windows, where a small gathering had assembled. The Tuesday Night Club, as they called themselves, met irregularly, but with a shared enthusiasm for the peculiar and the perplexing. Each member brought a mystery to the table, a riddle to be dissected by the group's collective wit, though none relished the challenge more than Miss Marple herself, whose unassuming demeanor belied a mind as sharp as her knitting needles. The room was cozy, its walls adorned with faded watercolors and shelves of well-thumbed books. A fire crackled in the grate, casting flickering shadows over the assembled company. Miss Marple sat in her favorite armchair, a shawl draped over her shoulders, her fingers deftly working a skein of pale blue wool. Her nephew, Raymond West, sprawled languidly on a sofa, his writer's imagination already stirring. Beside him, Joyce Lempriere, an artist with a penchant for bold sketches and bolder opinions, toyed with a pencil. Sir Henry Clithering, retired Commissioner of Scotland Yard, stood by the mantel, his keen eyes surveying the group with the air of a man accustomed to command. Mr. Petherick, the local solicitor, perched primly on a straight-backed chair, his spectacles glinting as he adjusted them. Dr. Haydock, the village physician, completed the circle, his ruddy face alight with anticipation as he prepared to present his tale. "It's my turn, I believe, Doctor," Haydock said, rubbing his hands together as though warming them for the task. His voice carried the confidence of a man who had seen life's darker corners, yet retained a spark of curiosity. "I've a case that's puzzled me for some time. It happened not far from here, in Much Benham, and it's the sort of thing that lingers in one's mind. A woman, Mrs. Eleanor Rhodes, died suddenly after a meal. Suspicion pointed to her husband, but the truth? Well, that's for you to decide." Miss Marple's needles paused, hovering like delicate antennae sensing a disturbance. Her pale blue eyes, deceptively mild, met Dr. Haydock's. "A sudden death," she murmured, "is so often more than it seems. Pray, tell us everything, Doctor. The smallest detail may be the key." Raymond West grinned, his literary flair scenting drama. "Poison, I'll wager, a classic domestic tragedy." "Don't leap to conclusions, Raymond," Joyce chided, her pencil scratching a quick caricature of a villainous husband. "Let's hear the facts first." Sir Henry, ever the professional, nodded. "Quite right. Facts before fancy. Go on, Haydock." Dr. Haydock settled into his chair, the firelight catching the silver in his hair. It was July, a warm evening, and Mrs. Rhodes, a woman of some means, dined at home with her husband, Charles. By all accounts, they were a respectable couple, though village gossip hinted at strains. She was found dead at the dining table, and I was called too late to do more than confirm the worst. The circumstances were suggestive. I'll say no more for now. Let's see what you make of it. Miss Marple tilted her head, her expression serene, but her mind already sifting through possibilities. A meal, she said softly, is such an intimate thing. One never knows what may be served alongside the food. I shall listen very carefully, Doctor. Haydock. The doctor smiled, sensing the quiet challenge in her words. The Tuesday night club leaned forward, the air thick with expectation, as the fire popped and the mystery began to unfold. Chapter 2. The Fatal Supper. The fire in Miss Marple's drawing room had settled into a steady glow, casting a warm light over the Tuesday night club as Dr. Haydock leaned forward, his voice taking on the measured cadence of a man accustomed to delivering diagnoses. The air was thick with anticipation, the kind that precedes a tale of human frailty and hidden motives. Miss Marple's knitting needles moved rhythmically, a soft counterpoint to the doctor's words, as the group awaited the details of the curious death in Much Benham. It was a sultry evening in July, Dr. Haydock began, his eyes distant as he recalled the scene. The sort of evening where the air hangs heavy, and even the birds seem too languid to sing. Rhodes Hall, the home of Mr. and Mrs. Charles Rhodes, stood on the edge of Much Benham, a handsome Georgian house with tall windows and a garden that was the envy of the county. Mrs. Eleanor Rhodes, a woman of 40, was dining with her husband in their elegant dining room. By 9 o'clock, she was dead. Sir Henry Clithering, his Scotland Yard instinct stirring, raised a hand. Before you go further, Haydock, give us the lay of the land. Who was in the house? What was the meal? Dr. Haydock nodded, appreciating the precision. The household was small but well run. Charles Rhodes, 45, a merchant dealing in textiles, was known for his charm and a certain extravagance. Eleanor, his wife, came from old money. Her father had been a landowner, and she inherited a considerable fortune. They had no children, which perhaps made the house quieter than it might have been. The staff consisted of Mrs. Bates, the cook, a woman of middle age with a reputation for loyalty; Lily, a young maid, barely 20, who was new to service and prone to nerves; and Tom, the gardener, a rough sort who kept to himself. That night, only the Rhodeses and the staff were present. And the meal? Joyce Lempriere prompted, her artist's imagination already sketching the scene. Dr. Haydock's brow furrowed slightly. The meal was simple but refined, as was their custom. Mrs. Bates prepared a curry dish for Mrs. Rhodes, who was particularly fond of it. Charles, who disliked spicy food, had a cold beef salad with bread and butter. They shared a fruit tart for dessert, made with plums from their own garden. There was wine, a claret, and water on the table. Nothing out of the ordinary, or so it seemed. Miss Marple's needles paused, her head tilting slightly. "A curry dish," she murmured. "Such a strong flavor. One might hide a great deal in a curry." Dr. Haydock glanced at her, a spark of recognition in his eyes. "You're not wrong, Miss Marple, but let me tell you how it unfolded. According to Lily, who served the meal, the Rhodeses dined at 7:30. They were not a talkative couple that evening. Lily noticed a certain coolness between them, though nothing overt. Mrs. Rhodes ate heartily, especially of the curry, which she always savored. Charles picked at his salad, drank a glass of wine, and seemed distracted. By 8:15, as Lily cleared the plates, Mrs. Rhodes began to complain of feeling unwell. She pressed a hand to her chest, her face pale, and within minutes she was gasping for breath. Charles called for help, but by the time I arrived, shortly before 9, she was gone. Raymond West leaned forward, his writer's flair for drama evident. Poison, surely. The symptoms sound like arsenic or strychnine. Not so fast, Raymond, Mr. Petherick interjected, adjusting his spectacles. You writers are always jumping to the sensational. What did the post-mortem show, Haydock? Dr. Haydock sighed, his fingers drumming lightly on the arm of his chair. That's where the mystery deepens. I conducted the post-mortem myself, with the coroner's approval. The symptoms, rapid pulse, convulsions, collapse, suggested poisoning, yes. But the stomach contents and blood tests revealed nothing conclusive. No arsenic, no strychnine, no cyanide. The curry remnants, the tart, even the wine were analyzed by a chemist in London. Nothing. The coroner, lacking evidence, recorded a verdict of natural causes, likely heart failure. But I've seen heart failure, and this felt different. Sir Henry's eyes narrowed. You suspect foul play, then? Why? The whispers, Dr. Haydock said simply. Much Benham is a small place, and tongues wag. Charles Rhodes had debts, not crippling, but enough to strain his finances. Eleanor's wealth kept them comfortable, and her will, drawn up years before, left everything to him. But there was talk of her consulting a solicitor about changes to that will. And then there's Miss Clara Vance. Joyce's pencil froze mid-sketch. A mistress? Dr. Haydock nodded. A singer, performing at local assemblies. Not a scandal in the open, but the village knew. Charles was seen with her at a concert in Danemouth, and there were rumors of letters. Eleanor, it said, was not unaware. Miss Marple's lips pursed slightly, though her expression remained serene. A woman's intuition is rarely wrong in such matters, she said softly. But tell me, Doctor, Haydock, was the curry prepared specially for Mrs. Rhodes? Yes, he replied. Mrs. Bates said it was Eleanor's favorite, a recipe she'd perfected over years. Charles never touched it. He couldn't abide the heat. The kitchen was Mrs. Bates's domain, and she was particular about her spices, bought from a reputable market in Danemouth. And the staff, Sir Henry pressed. What did they say? Dr. Haydock spread his hands. Mrs. Bates was distraught, swearing she'd done nothing different that day. Lily was a mess, crying and stammering, but she insisted she only served the food. Tom, the gardener, was questioned briefly. He was in the grounds that evening, but claimed he saw nothing, heard nothing. The police focused on Charles. Given the motive, but without evidence, they couldn't act. Raymond West smirked. It's obvious, isn't it? The husband poisoned the curry, slipped something in when no one was looking. Joyce shook her head. But the tests found nothing, and wouldn't Mrs. Bates or Lily have noticed if he tampered with the dish? Quite, Mr. Petherick said. A man like Charles Rhodes, a merchant, not a chemist, would need access to a poison that leaves no trace. That's no small feat. Miss Marple's needles resumed their steady rhythm. In St. Mary Mead, she said, almost to herself. There was a young man who once tried to poison his employer's tea. He used a common weed killer, thinking it undetectable. He was wrong, of course, but it made me think how easily one might misuse what lies at hand. A garden, perhaps, or a kitchen. Sir Henry turned to her, intrigued. "You're suggesting something natural? A plant, perhaps?" "I suggest nothing yet," Miss Marple replied, her tone mild but her eyes bright. "Only that we must consider how the poison, if it was poison, reached Mrs. Rhodes alone. The curry is curious, is it not? A dish only she ate, prepared with care, yet fatal." Dr. Haydock leaned back, a faint smile playing on his lips. "You've a knack for seeing the threads, Miss Marple. Let me give you more to work with." The dining room was on the ground floor, with French windows opening onto the garden. They were open that evening, to let in the air. Charles said he was in his study until dinner, going over accounts. Mrs. Bates was in the kitchen all afternoon, preparing the meal. Lily was back and forth, setting the table and helping in the kitchen. Tom, as I said, was somewhere in the grounds. "Somewhere," Sir Henry echoed. "That's vague. Did the police search the house thoroughly?" "They did," Dr. Haydock confirmed. "Every cupboard, every drawer, no vials, no powders, nothing suspicious. The spice jars in the kitchen were tested. Ordinary curry powder, turmeric, cumin, all clean. The wine bottle, the water jug, even the butter. Nothing amiss." Joyce frowned, tapping her pencil against her sketch pad. "Could the poison have been in something else? The tart, maybe?" "They both ate that." "Possible," Dr. Haydock said, but Charles showed no symptoms. If the tart was poisoned, why was he unaffected? And the symptoms came on so quickly after the curry, it seems the likely culprit. Miss Marple tilted her head, her fingers pausing briefly. "I once knew a cook who swore by her own spice blends, kept in a locked tin to prevent meddling. Did Mrs. Bates have such a habit?" Dr. Haydock considered. "She was particular, yes. She kept her spices in a cupboard, but it wasn't locked. She said no one touched them but her." "And yet," Miss Marple said softly, "a cupboard is so easily opened." Raymond West chuckled. "You're building a case already, Aunt Jane. But what poison could do this? Something fast, undetectable, and tasteless enough to hide in a curry?" "That," Miss Marple said, "is what we must discover." "But I think, Doctor Haydock, you've given us enough to ponder. A curry, a garden, a husband with a motive, and a staff who saw nothing, or say they saw nothing." Sir Henry nodded, his mind already turning over the details. "Let's consider the timeline. Dinner at 7:30, symptoms by 8:15, death before 9. That's a rapid poison, if poison it was. And the open windows. Could someone have entered from the garden?" Dr. Haydock shrugged. "The police thought it unlikely. The dining room was in full view of the table, and Lily was in and out. An intruder would have been seen." "Unless," Joyce said, her eyes gleaming, "the intruder was already in the house. One of the staff, perhaps." Mr. Petherick shook his head. "Motive, my dear Joyce. Why would Mrs. Bates or Lily risk such a thing? And Tom, the gardener, what reason could he have?" Miss Marple's needles clicked softly. "Reasons are like shadows, Mr. Petherick. They shift depending on the light. A gardener, for instance, knows more than roses. He knows what grows in the soil, what can harm as well as heal." Dr. Haydock raised an eyebrow. "You're thinking of something specific, aren't you?" "Not yet," Miss Marple said, her voice as gentle as ever. "But I shall think on it. A curry is such a convenient dish for hiding things, is it not? And a garden is so full of possibilities." The room fell silent for a moment. The fire's crackle, the only sound as the Tuesday night club absorbed the tale. Dr. Haydock's story had laid out a puzzle with all the hallmarks of a classic mystery: a sudden death, a suspicious husband, a loyal cook, a nervous maid, and a gardener whose vagueness hinted at secrets. Miss Marple's eyes, bright behind her spectacles, suggested she was already picking at the threads of the case, but she said no more, letting the others turn the problem over in their minds. Sir Henry broke the silence. "We'll need to know more about the household dynamics. Charles and Eleanor, were they openly at odds? And this Clara Vance, how serious was the affair?" Dr. Haydock nodded. "I'll gather what I can from village talk, but I warn you, Much Benham guards its secrets as fiercely as any place." Joyce grinned. "Not as fiercely as Miss Marple guards her theories. I'll wager she's already solved it." Miss Marple smiled, her needles moving once more. "Nonsense, Joyce. I merely observe. People are so careless with what they reveal, if one only watches closely." As the evening drew on, the Tuesday night club began to speculate, each member offering theories that ranged from the plausible to the fanciful. But Miss Marple, knitting quietly, let her thoughts drift to the garden of Rhodes Hall, to the spices in Mrs. Bates's cupboard, and to the heart of a marriage where love had perhaps given way to something darker. The fatal supper, she knew, held the key, and she would unravel it in her own time. Chapter 3. The Suspects and the Scene. The fire in Miss Marple's drawing room had dwindled to a soft glow, its embers casting a flickering light over the faces of the Tuesday night club. The air held a quiet intensity, as though the room itself were holding its breath, waiting for the next piece of Dr. Haydock's tale to fall into place. Miss Marple's knitting needles moved with their usual steady rhythm, a metronome to the unfolding mystery, while her eyes, sharp and observant behind their mild facade, followed the doctor's every word. The group, Raymond West, Joyce Lempriere, Sir Henry Clithering, Mr. Petherick, and Dr. Haydock, leaned forward, each mind grappling with the puzzle of Mrs. Eleanor Rhodes's sudden death. Sir Henry Clithering, his Scotland Yard experience lending him an air of authority, broke the silence with a crisp question. "Let's map out the scene, Haydock. The house, the people, the movements. Every mystery hinges on the details of who was where and when." Dr. Haydock nodded, his ruddy face thoughtful as he gathered his thoughts. Rhodes Hall is a fine old place built in the Georgian style, with tall sash windows and a sprawling garden that backs onto a copse of beech trees. The dining room, where Mrs. Rhodes died, is on the ground floor, facing the garden. It's a grand room, polished oak table, silver candelabra, and those French windows Sir Henry mentioned, which were open that evening to let in the breeze. The kitchen is at the back of the house, connected to the dining room by a short passage. The study, where Charles Rhodes claimed to be before dinner, is on the same floor, just across the hall. "And the staff?" Joyce Lempriere asked, her pencil poised over a sketch pad, where she'd begun to outline the layout of Rhodes Hall, her artist's eye capturing the scene in quick, deft strokes. "4 in total," Dr. Haydock replied. Mrs. Bates, the cook, was in her 50s, a sturdy woman with a no-nonsense manner. She'd been with the Rhodeses for a decade and was fiercely loyal to Mrs. Rhodes, who treated her more like a confidant than a servant. Lily, the maid, was young, 19, I believe, and new to the household, only 3 months in service. She was timid, easily flustered, and the police noted she seemed frightened when questioned, though that could have been nerves. Tom, the gardener, was a rough character, in his 30s, with a reputation for keeping to himself. He lived in a cottage on the estate and was known to be handy with plants, though not much for conversation. And then there was Charles Rhodes himself, the husband, a man of charm and ambition, but with a shadow of debt hanging over him. Miss Marple's needles paused briefly, her head tilting as though catching a faint note in the doctor's words. "A small household," she murmured. "So easy for secrets to slip through the cracks, yet so hard to hide them entirely. Tell me, Doctor." "Haydock, what did each of them say about that evening?" Dr. Haydock leaned back, his fingers steepled. "Let's start with Charles. He told the police he spent the afternoon in his study, working on accounts for his textile business. He said he joined his wife in the dining room at 7:30, as was their custom, and they dined without incident until she fell ill. He was adamant he touched none of the curry, only his beef salad and the shared tart. When Mrs. Rhodes collapsed, he claimed he shouted for Lily and tried to revive his wife, but it was no use." Raymond West smirked, his writer's imagination alight. "A likely story. The husband's always the first suspect, especially with money and a mistress in the mix." "Not so fast, Raymond," Mr. Petherick said, his solicitor's mind wary of hasty conclusions. "A motive is one thing, but opportunity and means are another. What of the cook?" "Mrs. Bates," Dr. Haydock continued, "was in the kitchen from mid-afternoon onward, preparing the meal. She said the curry was made fresh, as always, with chicken, onions, and her usual blend of spices. She swore no one entered the kitchen while she worked, though Lily was in and out fetching things. Mrs. Bates was shaken by Mrs. Rhodes's death. She'd been fond of her mistress, and the police found no reason to doubt her sincerity." Joyce frowned, sketching the outline of a spice jar. "Could someone have tampered with the spices before she used them?" "A good question," Sir Henry said. "But you said the spices were tested, Haydock. All clean?" "Yes," Dr. Haydock confirmed. "The police took samples from the kitchen, curry powder, turmeric, cumin, coriander, all from jars in Mrs. Bates's cupboard. The chemist found nothing unusual. The jars were glass with tight lids, and Mrs. Bates said she'd opened fresh ones that week from a delivery." Miss Marple's eyes gleamed faintly. "Fresh spices," she said softly. "How interesting. In St. Mary Mead, our grocer once delivered a tin of tea that had been tampered with. Not by him, mind you, but at the source. One wonders about deliveries." Sir Henry turned to her, intrigued. "You think the poison came from outside?" "I think nothing yet," Miss Marple replied, her tone as gentle as a summer breeze. "But a kitchen is a busy place, and a delivery is so easily overlooked." Dr. Haydock continued. "Lily, the maid, was the next to be questioned. She set the table, served the meal, and cleared the plates. She said she noticed nothing odd, no strange smells, no tampering. But she was nervous, almost incoherent at times, which the police put down to her youth and the shock of the death. She did mention one detail. Mrs. Rhodes seemed quieter than usual, as though something was on her mind." "And the gardener?" Mr. Petherick asked, adjusting his spectacles. "Tom was the least forthcoming," Dr. Haydock said. "He told the police he was in the garden all evening, pruning roses and tending to the vegetable patch. He claimed he never went near the house, but his story was vague. He couldn't say exactly where he was when Mrs. Rhodes died. The police didn't press him, as there was no clear link to the dining room." Joyce's pencil paused. "Those open French windows, though. Could he have slipped in?" "Possible," Sir Henry said, "but risky. The dining room was lit, and Lily was moving about. An intruder would have been seen, unless they were remarkably stealthy. Miss Marple's needles clicked softly. "A gardener need not enter a house to cause mischief," she said. "Gardens are full of things that can harm, plants, roots, even the soil itself. I once knew a man in St. Mary Mead who used a certain weed killer most unwisely. It made me think how easily one might misuse what grows naturally." Raymond chuckled. "You're hinting at something, Aunt Jane. Foxglove, perhaps, or deadly nightshade." "Don't tease, Raymond," Miss Marple said mildly. "I merely observe that a garden is a treasure trove, and a gardener knows its secrets better than most." Dr. Haydock's eyes narrowed slightly, as though sensing Miss Marple's mind at work. "The police did search the house, as I mentioned, but the garden was barely touched. They walked the grounds, questioned Tom, and left it at that. No one thought to dig up the flower beds or check the sheds." "A pity," Miss Marple said. "People are so careless about what lies outside their windows." Sir Henry leaned forward, his detective's instincts fully engaged. "Let's reconstruct the scene. Dinner at 7:30. Charles in his study until then, Mrs. Bates in the kitchen, Lily serving, Tom in the garden. The French windows open, the curry served only to Mrs. Rhodes. Symptoms by 8:15, death before 9. The poison, if it was poison, had to be in the curry, since Charles ate the tart and drank the wine without harm." Joyce tapped her sketchpad. "But how did it get there? Mrs. Bates swears she prepared it alone. Could Charles have slipped something into the dish as it was served?" "Unlikely," Dr. Haydock said. "Lily carried the plates from the kitchen to the dining room. She said Charles was seated when she brought the curry, and he didn't touch it." Mr. Petherick frowned. "Then it must have been in the kitchen before serving, but Mrs. Bates seems above suspicion." "Seems," Miss Marple echoed softly. "Loyalty is a fine thing, but it can blind us. A cook might not notice a small change in her ingredients, especially if she trusts her routine." Dr. Haydock nodded. "Mrs. Bates did say she left the kitchen briefly to fetch herbs from the garden, parsley for the salad, I believe. The kitchen door was open, as it often was in summer." Sir Henry's eyes lit up. An opportunity, then. Someone could have entered the kitchen in that moment. "But who?" Joyce asked. "Charles was in his study, Lily was setting the table, and Tom was somewhere." Miss Marple's needles paused again. "Somewhere," she repeated. "How convenient. In St. Mary Mead, we had a gardener once who was always somewhere when trouble arose. It made me wonder what he was really doing." Raymond grinned. "You're building a case against Tom, aren't you? The silent gardener, slipping poison into the curry while Mrs. Bates was out." "I build nothing," Miss Marple said, her voice serene. "I only think of possibilities. A gardener, a cook, a maid, a husband, each has their place in the pattern, and each might hold a thread to pull." Dr. Haydock leaned forward, intrigued. "Let me add one more detail. The police interviewed a neighbor, Mrs. Langley, who lived across the lane. She said she saw Tom in the garden that evening, near the kitchen door, around 6:30. He was carrying a basket, she thought, but it was dusk, and she couldn't be sure what was in it." "A basket," Sir Henry said. "Could be innocent, vegetables perhaps, or something else." Joyce's pencil flew across her pad, sketching a shadowy figure with a basket. "Something sinister, you mean? A poisoner's toolkit?" Mr. Petherick shook his head. "We're speculating wildly. We need a motive for Tom. Why would he harm Mrs. Rhodes?" "Money," Raymond suggested. "Charles could have paid him. A merchant with debts might find a gardener's services useful, especially one who knows his plants." Miss Marple's eyes twinkled. Or perhaps Tom had his own reasons. People are not always what they seem. A quiet man may have loud thoughts. Dr. Haydock smiled faintly. You're weaving a web, Miss Marple, but let's consider Charles again. The police looked into his finances. His textile business was sound, but he'd made some risky investments, stocks that hadn't paid off. Eleanor's fortune kept him afloat, and her death secured it. There was also the matter of the will. Mrs. Langley, the neighbor, mentioned Eleanor had an appointment with a solicitor in Danemouth the week before she died. No one knows if she changed her will, but the rumor was she meant to. Sir Henry nodded. That's a strong motive. If Charles knew she was cutting him out, he'd act quickly. But how? Joyce asked. He's no chemist, and the poison was undetectable. Miss Marple's needles resumed their rhythm. Knowledge is not so hard to come by, she said. A book, a conversation, a visit to a library. In St. Mary Mead, a young woman once learned how to make a trap for moles simply by asking the right questions. A man like Charles Rhodes, with his charm, could learn what he needed. Dr. Haydock raised an eyebrow. You think he studied poisons? I think, Miss Marple said, that we must look at what is possible. A curry, a garden, an open window, a basket. These are the pieces, and they fit somewhere. The room fell silent, the fire's soft crackle underscoring the weight of the mystery. The Tuesday night club turned over the details, each member testing theories against the sparse but tantalizing facts. Charles Rhodes, with his debts and his mistress, seemed the obvious suspect, yet the absence of evidence frustrated the case. Mrs. Bates, loyal and meticulous, appeared beyond reproach, but her brief absence from the kitchen opened a window of opportunity. Lily, nervous and inexperienced, might have seen something she feared to admit, and Tom, the enigmatic gardener, lingered in the shadows of the tale, his vague answers and evening wanderings hinting at secrets yet to be uncovered. Sir Henry broke the silence. We need more on the garden. If Miss Marple's right, and the poison came from there, we're missing a piece of the puzzle. Haydock, can you find out what plants were grown at Rhodes Hall? I can try, Dr. Haydock said. The police reports might mention the grounds, and I know a botanist in Danemouth who could help. Joyce grinned. And I'll keep sketching. Maybe I'll draw the truth out of this. Mr. Petherick adjusted his spectacles. I'll look into the will. If Mrs. Rhodes was changing it, there may be documents to prove it. Miss Marple smiled faintly, her knitting a steady anchor in the swirl of speculation. And I shall think, she said. People are so like my neighbors in St. Mary Mead. They do not change, only their settings do. As the evening drew on, the Tuesday night club continued to probe the mystery, each member adding their perspective to the intricate tapestry of Rhodes Hall. But Miss Marple, with her quiet wisdom and her knack for seeing the human heart, knew that the answer lay not just in the facts, but in the small, overlooked details, the kind that only a village spinster, with her endless curiosity and her sharp eye for patterns, could uncover. Chapter 4. The investigation begins. The drawing room of Miss Marple's cottage in St. Mary Mead was steeped in the hush of late evening, the fire's embers casting a soft, ruddy glow over the faces of the Tuesday night club. The air held a charged stillness, as if the very walls were leaning in to hear Dr. Haydock's tale unfold. Miss Marple sat in her armchair, her knitting a delicate counterpoint to the weighty discussion, her fingers moving with the precision of a clockmaker, while her eyes, bright and discerning, followed every nuance of the conversation. The group, Raymond West, Joyce Lempriere, Sir Henry Clithering, Mr. Petherick, and Dr. Haydock, sat poised, their minds wrestling with the enigma of Mrs. Eleanor Rhodes's death at Rhodes Hall. Sir Henry Clithering, his years at Scotland Yard lending him a methodical air, took charge with a question that cut to the heart of the matter. "Let's piece together the investigation, Haydock. What did the police do after Mrs. Rhodes's death, and what did they miss? A case like this hinges on the gaps." Dr. Haydock nodded, his expression one of a man revisiting a puzzle that had long vexed him. The police were thorough, up to a point. The Much Benham Constabulary, led by Inspector Druitt, arrived within the hour of Mrs. Rhodes's collapse. They sealed the dining room, interviewed the household, and sent the food remnants, curry, tart, salad, wine, for analysis in London. The house was searched from attic to cellar, every drawer and cupboard turned out. They were looking for a vial, a packet, anything that might hold poison. They found nothing, no suspicious substances, no hidden bottles. Joyce Lempriere, her artist's pencil sketching the outline of a dining table, frowned. Nothing at all? That's suspicious in itself. A poisoner would need something to work with. "Exactly," Sir Henry said, leaning forward. "No trace of poison suggests either remarkable cunning or no poison at all. What did the household say under questioning?" Dr. Haydock rubbed his chin, recalling the details. Charles. Rhodes was cooperative, if shaken. He repeated his story. He'd been in his study all afternoon, working on accounts, and joined his wife for dinner at 7:30. He insisted he ate only the beef salad and the plum tart, avoiding the curry because of its heat. When Eleanor collapsed, he said he tried to loosen her collar and called for Lily, but she was beyond help. The inspector found his manner convincing, but the rumors about his debts and Miss Clara Vance made them wary. Raymond West, ever the dramatist, smirked. A grieving widower with a fortune to gain and a singer on the side. It's practically a novel. "Don't be flippant, Raymond," Mr. Petherick said, his solicitor's precision cutting through. "Motive is one thing, but the police found no evidence. What of the staff?" Dr. Haydock continued. Mrs. Bates, the cook, was questioned at length. She'd prepared the curry as she always did, using fresh chicken and vegetables from the market and spices from her cupboard. She was adamant no one entered the kitchen while she worked, though she admitted to stepping out for a few minutes around 6 to fetch parsley from the herb garden. The kitchen door was open, as it often was in summer, but she saw no one. She was devastated by Mrs. Rhodes's death, calling her the kindest mistress she'd ever served. Miss Marple's needles paused, her head tilting slightly. "Parsley," she murmured. "Such a harmless herb, and yet so easily mistaken for others in a garden. I recall a case in St. Mary Mead where a young girl confused parsley with hemlock. Most unfortunate." Sir Henry's eyes narrowed. "You're suggesting the poison came from the garden, Miss Marple?" "I suggest nothing," she replied, her voice as gentle as a breeze. "But a kitchen door left open, a cook stepping out, a garden so near, it makes one think." Dr. Haydock went on. Lily, the maid, was less composed. She told the police she'd set the dining table, served the meal, and cleared the plates. She noticed nothing unusual about the food or the Rhodeses' behavior, though she said Mrs. Rhodes seemed subdued, as if preoccupied. Lily was trembling during her interview, which Inspector Druitt attributed to her inexperience and the shock of the event. She did mention one odd detail. As she carried the curry to the dining room, she thought she heard a rustle in the passage, but when she looked, no one was there. Joyce's pencil froze mid-sketch. A rustle? That's intriguing. Could someone have been lurking? Possibly, Dr. Haydock said. But the passage leads only to the kitchen and the back door. The police checked it. No signs of an intruder. The French windows in the dining room were open, but the garden was visible from the table, and Charles and Eleanor were seated throughout. "And the gardener?" Mr. Petherick asked, adjusting his spectacles. "This Tom fellow seems elusive." "Tom was the least cooperative," Dr. Haydock said. "He told the police he was in the garden all evening, tending to roses and weeding the vegetable patch. He claimed he never went near the house, but his answers were vague. He couldn't pinpoint his exact movements. The police didn't press him, as there was no evidence linking him to the dining room. Mrs. Langley, the neighbor, confirmed seeing him near the kitchen door around 6:30, carrying a basket, but she couldn't say what was in it. Sir Henry leaned back, his mind turning over the details. A basket, that could hold anything, tools, vegetables, or something less innocent. Did the police search the garden? Barely, Dr. Haydock admitted. They walked the grounds, glanced at the sheds, and questioned Tom. But with no poison found in the house, they focused on the kitchen and dining room. The garden was an afterthought. Miss Marple's needles clicked softly, her expression serene, but her mind clearly at work. "A garden is never an afterthought," she said. "In St. Mary Mead, we had a gardener who grew monkshood alongside his delphiniums. Beautiful, but deadly. One wonders what grew at Rhodes Hall." Raymond grinned. "You're circling something, Aunt Jane. Aconite, perhaps? It's fast and deadly, and a gardener would know it." "Don't rush me, Raymond," Miss Marple said mildly. "I'm only thinking of what might be possible. A basket, an open door, a moment's absence. These are small things, but small things unravel great mysteries." Sir Henry turned to Dr. Haydock. "Let's go back to the curry. It's the key, since only Mrs. Rhodes ate it. How was it prepared exactly?" Dr. Haydock rubbed his hands together, as though warming to the task. "Mrs. Bates was meticulous. She described the process to the police. She chopped the chicken and vegetables, onions, carrots, peppers, in the early afternoon. She cooked them in a pot with oil, then added her spice mix, which she blended herself from jars in her cupboard. She simmered it slowly, adding coconut milk and a touch of cream for richness. The curry was served in a single dish, from which Lily ladled a portion for Mrs. Rhodes. Charles's salad was prepared separately, with lettuce, cucumber, and beef from a joint roasted the previous day. The plum tart was baked that morning, using fruit from the garden. Joyce frowned, sketching a curry pot. So the poison had to be in the curry itself, not the ingredients shared with the salad or tart. But how did it get there without Mrs. Bates noticing? "That's the puzzle," Dr. Haydock said. Mrs. Bates swore she tasted the curry as she cooked, as was her habit, and noticed nothing amiss. The spices were strong, but not unusual. The police tested the leftovers. Nothing. They even checked the pot and utensils. All clean. Miss Marple tilted her head, her eyes distant. "A strong flavor," she said softly. "Curry is such a forgiving dish. In St. Mary Mead, our vicar's wife once served a curry that hid the taste of slightly off mutton. No one was the wiser except perhaps the cat, who refused it." Sir Henry chuckled. "You're suggesting the curry masked the poison?" "Perhaps," Miss Marple said. "Or perhaps the poison was not in the curry at all, but in something added at the last moment. A spice jar, a pinch of something slipped in. It need not be much. Mr. Petherick raised an eyebrow. But the spices were tested, Miss Marple, and Mrs. Bates was alone in the kitchen, except for her brief absence. Alone, Miss Marple echoed. And yet a door was open, and a gardener was near. People are so trusting of what they know. Dr. Haydock leaned forward, intrigued. You're hinting at sabotage, but who? Charles was in his study, Lily was busy, and Tom was outside. And what poison could act so quickly yet leave no trace? Sir Henry nodded. The symptoms, rapid pulse, convulsions, collapse, suggest something potent. Aconite, as Raymond mentioned, or perhaps digitalis, but both would require knowledge and access. Joyce's pencil moved again, sketching a shadowy figure by a kitchen door. What if Tom slipped in while Mrs. Bates was out? He could have added something to the curry pot. Risky, Mr. Petherick said. Lily might have seen him, and why would he do it? What's his motive? Miss Marple's needles resumed their rhythm. Motives are like weeds, Mr. Petherick. They grow where you least expect. A gardener might act for money or loyalty or some hidden grudge. We know so little about Tom. Dr. Haydock nodded. The police didn't dig into his background. He'd worked at Rhodes Hall for 2 years, kept the garden immaculate, but was a loner. No family in Much Benham, no known ties to the Rhodeses. Sir Henry frowned. We need more on him and on Charles's movements. He says he was in his study, but was he seen there? Could he have gone to the kitchen? Dr. Haydock shook his head. Lily said she passed the study door around 6 and heard Charles moving papers. The study window faces the front of the house, not the garden, so he'd have had to cross the hall to reach the kitchen. Lily was in the passage often, setting the table. Miss Marple's eyes gleamed faintly. A hall is such a public place, is it not? In St. Mary Mead, our postman once saw something he shouldn't because he lingered in a hall. One wonders what Lily truly saw, or didn't see. Joyce grinned. You think she's hiding something? She was so nervous. Nerves can mean many things, Miss Marple said. Fear of authority, guilt, or simply knowing more than one dares say. A young maid in a grand house, she might hesitate to speak. Sir Henry turned to Dr. Haydock. What about the neighbor, Mrs. Langley? Her sighting of Tom is the only concrete detail we have outside the house. She was firm, Dr. Haydock said. She was in her garden, across the lane, at dusk, around 6:30. She saw Tom near the kitchen door, carrying a basket. She thought he was collecting vegetables, but it was too dark to be sure. She didn't see him enter the house. Mr. Petherick adjusted his spectacles. A basket could hold anything, but we're still missing the poison itself. If it wasn't in the spices or the food, where was it? Miss Marple's needles clicked softly. I once knew a woman who kept her medicines in a cupboard, much like Mrs. Bates's spice jars. One day she mistook one bottle for another. It made me think how easily things can be confused, especially in a busy kitchen. Sir Henry leaned forward. You're suggesting a substitution? A poison disguised as a spice? Or added to one, Miss Marple said. A pinch of something, slipped into a jar, would be so easy to overlook, especially if the jar was newly opened. Dr. Haydock's eyes lit up. The spices were delivered that week, you said. Could someone have tampered with them before they reached the kitchen? The police checked the supplier, Dr. Haydock said. A reputable market in Danemouth. No irregularities, and other customers used the same batch without issue. Miss Marple smiled faintly. And yet, a jar is so easily opened, even before it reaches a kitchen, or after. The room fell silent, the fire's soft crackle underscoring the weight of the mystery. The Tuesday Night Club turned over the new details, each member testing theories against the facts. Charles Rhodes, with his motive of money and a mistress, remained the prime suspect, but his distance from the kitchen posed a problem. Mrs. Bates's loyalty seemed unshakable, yet her absence opened a window of opportunity. Lily's nerves hinted at something unspoken, and Tom's vagueness, coupled with his basket and proximity to the kitchen, cast a shadow over the garden. Sir Henry broke the silence. "We need to know more about that garden. If Miss Marple's right, the poison could be botanical, something Tom grew or harvested." Dr. Haydock nodded. "I'll see what I can find. The police reports might mention the plants, and I can ask my botanist friend in Danemouth." Joyce grinned, sketching a garden path. "And I'll keep drawing. Maybe I'll catch Tom in the act." Mr. Petherick adjusted his spectacles. "I'll look into Charles's finances and the will. If Mrs. Rhodes was altering it, there may be proof." Miss Marple's knitting continued, a steady anchor in the swirl of speculation. "And I shall think," she said softly, "people are so like my neighbors in St. Mary Mead. Their actions repeat, only the scenery changes." As the evening deepened, the Tuesday Night Club continued to probe the mystery, each member adding their thread to the tapestry of Rhodes Hall. But Miss Marple, with her quiet wisdom and her eye for the small, human details, knew the answer lay in the interplay of trust and betrayal, in the spaces where a cook stepped out, a maid hesitated, or a gardener lingered too long. Chapter 5. Motives and Secrets. The drawing room of Miss Jane Marple's cottage in St. Mary Mead was a haven of quiet intensity, the fire's embers casting a gentle, wavering light across the faces of the Tuesday Night Club. The hour was growing late, yet the air thrummed with the unspoken tension of a mystery unresolved. Miss Marple sat in her familiar armchair, her knitting needles moving with the unhurried precision of a village clock, each click a reminder of the steady passage of thought. Her eyes, deceptively mild behind their spectacles, gleamed with a quiet alertness as she absorbed every word of Dr. Haydock's tale. The group, Raymond West, Joyce Lempriere, Sir Henry Clithering, Mr. Petherick, and Dr. Haydock, sat in a loose circle, their minds sifting through the fragments of the much Benham mystery, each eager to uncover the thread that would unravel the death of Mrs. Eleanor Rhodes. Mr. Petherick, his solicitor's mind attuned to the intricacies of human motive, adjusted his spectacles and broke the silence. "We've established the scene and the players. Haydock, now let's dig into the why. Motive is the heart of any crime. What drove someone to poison Mrs. Rhodes, if indeed it was poison?" Dr. Haydock leaned forward, his ruddy face thoughtful, the firelight catching the lines of a man who had seen both life and death in his practice. "Motive is where the case grows murky," he began. "Charles Rhodes is the obvious starting point. He stood to gain a fortune from Eleanor's death. Her wealth, inherited from her father's estate, was substantial. Land, investments, and a tidy sum in the bank. Charles's textile business, while outwardly prosperous, was not without its strains. He'd made several unwise investments in speculative ventures, cotton mills in the north that failed to deliver. The village whispered of debts, not crippling but persistent, and Eleanor's money kept their lifestyle intact. Her will, drawn up early in their marriage, named him the sole beneficiary. But there was talk, as I mentioned, that she was considering changes. Joyce Lempriere, her artist's pencil, sketching the outline of a ledger book, looked up sharply. Changes to the will? That's a powerful motive. If Charles knew she was cutting him out, he'd have every reason to act quickly. Precisely, Sir Henry Clithering said, his Scotland Yard instincts stirring. Did the police confirm this talk of a new will? Dr. Haydock nodded. They spoke to Mr. Grayson, a solicitor in Danemouth. Eleanor had an appointment with him a week before her death. She didn't disclose her intentions, but Grayson said she asked about the process for amending a will, particularly regarding trusts for distant relatives. She made no changes before she died, but the appointment was enough to fuel speculation. Miss Marple's needles paused, her head tilting slightly. "Relatives," she murmured. "How interesting. In St. Mary Mead, we had a widow who considered leaving her fortune to a cousin she barely knew, simply to spite her husband. One wonders who Mrs. Rhodes had in mind." Dr. Haydock shrugged. "No one knows. Eleanor had no close family. Her parents were long dead, and she had no siblings. There were distant cousins, I believe, but none she was close to. The police couldn't find evidence she'd contacted anyone." Raymond West leaned back, his writer's flair for drama evident. "Then it's the mistress angle. This Clara Vance, Charles's paramour. If Eleanor knew about her, she might have threatened to cut him off, and he panicked." Dr. Haydock's expression grew grim. "Clara Vance was indeed a factor. She's a singer, about 30, with a small following in the county's music halls. Not a star, but charming enough to turn heads. Charles was seen with her at a concert in Danemouth, and there were rumors of private meetings at a tea-house in Much Benham. The village gossip held that Eleanor had learned of the affair, though no one could say how. Mrs. Langley, the neighbor, claimed Eleanor was quieter in the weeks before her death, as if burdened by some private sorrow. Joyce's pencil moved swiftly, sketching a woman in a flowing dress, a singer's poise in her lines. If Eleanor confronted Charles, or if she planned to change her will because of Clara, that's motive enough. But poison? That's cold-blooded. Sir Henry nodded. Poison requires planning, not just motive. Charles is a merchant, not a scientist. Where would he get a poison that leaves no trace? Miss Marple's needles resumed their rhythm, her voice soft but piercing. Knowledge is not so rare as one thinks. In St. Mary Mead, a young man once read a book on chemistry to impress a girl. He learned more than he intended, and not all of it was harmless. A man like Charles Rhodes, with his charm and connections, could find what he needed, a library, a friend, even a casual question to the right person. Dr. Haydock raised an eyebrow. "You think he researched poisons?" "I think," Miss Marple said, "that people are resourceful when they wish to be. But let us consider the others. Motive is not Charles's alone, surely." Mr. Petherick frowned, his legal mind turning over the possibilities. "The staff, you mean? Mrs. Bates, Lily, Tom? What reason could they have?" Dr. Haydock spread his hands. Mrs. Bates seemed devoted to Eleanor. She'd been with the family for years, and her grief at the inquest was genuine. The police found no hint of ill will. She had no financial troubles. Her wages were good, and she lived comfortably on the estate. If anything, Eleanor's death left her worse off, as Charles was less generous with the staff. Joyce tapped her pencil against her sketchpad. Loyalty can mask things. Could she have been bribed or coerced? "Possible," Sir Henry said, "but unlikely without evidence." A cook like Mrs. Bates would notice tampering in her kitchen, especially with her precious spices. Miss Marple tilted her head, her eyes distant. Unless the tampering was subtle, a spice jar perhaps, or an ingredient she trusted. In St. Mary Mead, our grocer's wife once sold flour that had been mixed with chalk by mistake. No one suspected until the bread tasted odd. A cook might not notice a small addition, especially in a dish as bold as curry. Dr. Haydock nodded thoughtfully. Mrs. Bates did say she used a new jar of curry powder that week, delivered from the Danemouth market, but, as I said, the police tested it. Clean. And yet, Miss Marple said softly, a jar is so easily opened, even before it reaches a kitchen, or after, when no one is looking. Sir Henry turned to the maid. What about Lily? Her nerves suggest she might know more than she told. Lily was a puzzle, Dr. Haydock admitted. She was young, barely out of school, and new to service. The police thought her nervousness was natural. She'd never seen death up close, let alone been questioned by an inspector. She stuck to her story. She set the table, served the meal, and cleared the plates. She saw nothing unusual except for that rustle in the passage, which she couldn't explain. The police pressed her, thinking she might be hiding something, but she broke into tears and swore she knew nothing. Joyce's sketchpad now bore the image of a trembling maid, her apron askew. Fear can mean guilt, or it can mean she saw something she's afraid to admit. Maybe she glimpsed Tom near the kitchen. Or Charles, Raymond added. If he left his study, she might have seen him and been too scared to say. Miss Marple's needles clicked softly. A maid sees so much in a house. In St. Mary Mead, our parlor maid once overheard a conversation she wasn't meant to. It changed everything. Lily may have seen or heard something, a word, a glance, that frightened her. Dr. Haydock frowned. The police didn't think so, but they didn't press her hard. She was so young, and there was no evidence against her. And the gardener? Mr. Petherick asked, his tone skeptical. This Tom seems to hover on the edges of the story. What's his stake in this? Dr. Haydock leaned back, his fingers drumming lightly on the arm of his chair. Tom is the enigma. He'd worked at Rhodes Hall for 2 years, tending the gardens with a skill that earned him respect, if not affection. He lived alone in a cottage on the estate, kept to himself, and had no known quarrels with the Rhodeses. The police questioned him about his movements that evening, but his answers were vague. He was weeding or pruning, always somewhere in the garden. Mrs. Langley's sighting of him near the kitchen door with a basket was the only specific detail, but it led nowhere. The police saw no motive, no connection to Eleanor's death. Sir Henry's eyes narrowed. No motive we know of. A gardener has access to things others don't. Plants, chemicals, tools. Could he have been paid to act? Raymond grinned. There's your plot twist, Aunt Jane. Charles hires the gardener to slip poison into the curry, keeping his own hands clean. Miss Marple's expression remained serene, but her eyes twinkled. It's a possibility, Raymond, but gardeners are not always so easily swayed. They have their own loyalties, their own secrets. In St. Mary Mead, we had a gardener who grew a rare flower for a lady he admired against his employer's wishes. It made me think how much a garden can hide. Joyce's pencil paused. You're suggesting Tom had his own reason? A grudge, maybe? I suggest nothing, Miss Marple said, her voice as gentle as ever. But a man who works alone, who knows the secrets of plants, might act for reasons we don't yet see. A basket near a kitchen door is such a curious thing. Dr. Haydock leaned forward, intrigued. The police didn't search the garden thoroughly. They glanced at the sheds, walked the paths, but didn't dig into the flower beds or check Tom's tools. If the poison was botanical, as Miss Marple hints, it could have come from there. Sir Henry nodded. We need to know what grew at Rhodes Hall. Foxglove, aconite, hemlock. Any of these could be deadly, and a gardener would know how to use them. Miss Marple's needles moved steadily. And how to hide them, she added. A plant can be so innocent in a garden, yet so dangerous in a kitchen. Mr. Petherick adjusted his spectacles. Let's not forget the practicalities. A poison like digitalis or aconite would need to be prepared, dried, ground, perhaps steeped. That takes time and knowledge. Could Tom or Charles have done this without being noticed? Dr. Haydock shrugged. Charles had his study, a private space. Tom had his cottage and the garden sheds. Either could have worked in secret, though the police found nothing in their searches. Joyce frowned, sketching a garden shed. What if the poison wasn't prepared in advance? What if it was something fresh, added at the last moment? A good thought, Sir Henry said. A fresh leaf or root, ground into a powder, could be slipped into a spice jar or the curry itself. The strong flavor would mask it. Miss Marple tilted her head, her eyes distant. In St. Mary Mead, a young woman once used a pestle and mortar to grind herbs for her tea. She thought no one noticed, but the kitchen maid saw the dust on her hands. Small things betray us. Dr. Haydock's eyes lit up. You think someone's hands might tell the tale? Mrs. Bates, Lily, Tom. None were checked for such signs. Nor the jars, Miss Marple said, softly. A lid unscrewed, a pinch added, a lid replaced. So simple, yet so hard to prove. Sir Henry leaned back, his mind turning over the possibilities. Let's summarize the motives. Charles. Money and a mistress with the threat of a changed will. Mrs. Bates. Loyal, but possibly coerced or deceived. Lily. Nervous, perhaps hiding something she saw. Tom. No clear motive, but his vagueness and access to the garden make him suspect. Raymond grinned. And don't forget Clara Vance. She might have wanted Eleanor out of the way to secure Charles. Joyce shook her head. That's a stretch. She's not in the house, and poison is a man's crime, isn't it? Not always, Miss Marple said, her voice quiet but firm. Women can be as cunning as men, Joyce, but I agree. Miss Vance is a shadow in this story, not a player. Yet. Dr. Haydock smiled faintly. You're weaving a tight net, Miss Marple. What's next? I shall think, she said, her needles clicking softly. Motives are like threads in a tapestry. Pull one, and the pattern shifts. We must look at what each person wanted and what they feared. Sir Henry nodded. I'll ask Haydock to dig into Tom's background. And the garden, someone needs to catalog what's growing there. Joyce grinned, her sketch pad now filled with images of spice jars, baskets, and shadowy figures. I'll keep drawing. Maybe I'll see something we've missed. Mr. Petherick adjusted his spectacles. And I'll check on that will. If Eleanor was planning to change it, there may be a paper trail. Miss Marple's knitting continued, a steady anchor in the swirl of speculation. And I shall think of St. Mary Mead, she said. People are the same everywhere. Their secrets, their fears, their mistakes. They repeat, only the names change. The fire crackled softly, its light dancing across the room as the Tuesday night club delved deeper into the mystery. Charles Rhodes's motives were clear, yet his distance from the kitchen posed a challenge. Mrs. Bates's loyalty seemed unshakable, but her absence opened a door to doubt. Lily's nerves hinted at unseen truths, and Tom's shadowy presence in the garden suggested secrets yet to be unearthed. Miss Marple, with her quiet wisdom and her knack for seeing the human heart, knew the answer lay in the interplay of trust, betrayal, and the small, careless acts that reveal the truth. Chapter 6. A Closer Look. The drawing room of Miss Jane Marple's cottage in St. Mary Mead was cloaked in the quiet intimacy of a late autumn evening, the fire's embers casting a soft, wavering glow over the faces of the Tuesday night club. The air was thick with the weight of an unsolved mystery. Each member of the group, Raymond West, Joyce Lempriere, Sir Henry Clithering, Mr. Petherick, and Dr. Haydock, poised on the edge of their seats, their minds wrestling with the enigma of Mrs. Eleanor Rhodes's death. Miss Marple sat in her armchair, her knitting needles moving with a rhythmic precision that belied the keen alertness of her mind. Her eyes, bright behind their mild facade, followed the conversation with the quiet intensity of a hawk watching a field. Sir Henry Clithering, his Scotland Yard experience lending him a commanding air, leaned forward, his voice crisp with purpose. "We've laid out the players, the scene, and the motives, Haydock. Now let's narrow our focus. The curry is the key. Mrs. Rhodes alone ate it, and her symptoms followed swiftly. We need to understand exactly how that dish was prepared and who had access to it. Every detail matters." Dr. Haydock nodded, his ruddy face thoughtful as he gathered his thoughts. "The curry," he began, "was Mrs. Bates's specialty, a dish she'd perfected over years at Mrs. Rhodes's request. She prepared it that afternoon, starting around 3 o'clock. She used fresh chicken from the butcher, onions and carrots from the market, and a blend of spices she kept in glass jars in her kitchen cupboard. She cooked it slowly in a heavy pot, adding coconut milk and a touch of cream for richness. She tasted it as she went, as was her habit, and noticed nothing unusual. The curry was served from a single tureen, ladled onto Mrs. Rhodes's plate by Lily at the dining table. Joyce Lempriere, her pencil sketching the outline of a steaming tureen, frowned. So the poison, if it was poison, had to be in the curry itself, not the shared tart or wine. But Mrs. Bates tasted it and was fine. How could it be poisoned without affecting her? "A good question," Sir Henry said, his eyes narrowing. "Either the poison was added after Mrs. Bates's last taste, or it was something that didn't affect her in small doses. What about the spices? You said they were tested." Dr. Haydock nodded. "The police took every jar from the kitchen, curry powder, turmeric, cumin, coriander, chili. All were sent to a chemist in London, who found no trace of poison. Mrs. Bates said she'd opened a new jar of curry powder that week, delivered from a reputable market in Danemouth. The supplier was questioned, and their stock was clean. No other customers reported issues." Miss Marple's needles paused, her head tilting slightly, as though catching a faint whisper of a clue. "A new jar," she murmured. "How convenient. In St. Mary Mead, our grocer once delivered a tin of cocoa that had been opened before it reached the customer. No one thought to check until the taste was wrong. One wonders about those jars." Sir Henry turned to her, intrigued. "You suspect tampering at the source?" "I suspect nothing yet," Miss Marple said, her voice as gentle as a summer breeze. "But a jar is so easily opened, and a kitchen is so full of distractions. Tell me, Doctor, Haydock, was Mrs. Bates alone the entire time she cooked?" Dr. Haydock rubbed his chin. "She said she was, except for that brief moment when she stepped out to the herb garden for parsley around 6. The kitchen door was open, as it often was in summer, to let in the air. Lily was in and out, fetching plates and cutlery, but Mrs. Bates insisted no one else entered. Raymond West leaned forward, his writer's imagination alight. That's the moment, isn't it? Someone slips in, adds a pinch of something to the curry, and slips out. Classic. Not so fast, Raymond, Mr. Petherick said, his solicitor's mind wary of leaps. The kitchen door opens to the garden where Tom was seen, but Lily was moving about and the dining room wasn't far. It's a risky move. Miss Marple's needles resumed their rhythm. Risk is relative, she said softly. In St. Mary Mead, a young man once stole a pie from a windowsill while the cook was in the next room. He was quick, and no one suspected. A moment is all it takes. Dr. Haydock leaned forward, intrigued. You're suggesting someone took advantage of that moment. But who? Charles was in his study, Lily was busy, and Tom was in the garden. Or near the kitchen door, Joyce added, her pencil sketching a shadowy figure with a basket. Mrs. Langley saw him there at 6:30, didn't she? Yes, Dr. Haydock confirmed. Mrs. Langley, the neighbor across the lane, was in her garden at dusk. She saw Tom near the kitchen door, carrying a basket. She thought he was collecting vegetables, but it was too dark to be sure. The police didn't press her further, as it seemed irrelevant without evidence of poison. Sir Henry's eyes gleamed with interest. A basket could hold anything, tools, plants, or something deadly. Did the police search Tom's cottage or the garden sheds? Barely, Dr. Haydock admitted. They glanced at the sheds, checked his tools, but found nothing suspicious. The garden itself was overlooked. They walked the paths but didn't dig into the beds or inspect the plants. Their focus was the house, the kitchen, the dining room. Miss Marple's eyes twinkled faintly. A garden is such a treasure trove, she said. In St. Mary Mead, we had a gardener who grew foxglove among his roses, not for beauty but for mischief. One never knows what grows in a quiet corner. Raymond grinned. You're circling Tom, Aunt Jane. You think he slipped something into the curry? Foxglove, maybe? Digitalis would explain the heart failure. Don't rush me, Raymond, Miss Marple said mildly. I'm only thinking of what might be. A gardener knows his plants, and plants can be so deceptive, beautiful, yet deadly. Sir Henry turned to Dr. Haydock. We need to know what grew at Rhodes Hall. Foxglove, aconite, hemlock. Any could be lethal in the right hands. Can you find out? I can try, Dr. Haydock said. I know a botanist in Danemouth who might have records of the estate's gardens. The police reports may mention something, though. They were sparse on that front. Joyce's pencil moved swiftly, sketching a garden bed with tall, bell-shaped flowers. What if Tom ground up a plant, foxglove leaves, say, and added it to the curry? The flavor would be masked. Possible, Mr. Petherick said, adjusting his spectacles. But it takes knowledge to prepare such a poison. Digitalis, for instance, requires drying and grinding, or an extract. Would Tom have that skill? Miss Marple tilted her head, her expression serene. Gardeners learn more than we think. In St. Mary Mead, our old gardener knew how to distill oils from herbs for his rheumatism. It wasn't in any book. He learned from his father. A man like Tom might know more than he says. Dr. Haydock nodded thoughtfully. Tom was a loner, but he was skilled. The Rhodes' garden was the envy of much Benham, roses, delphiniums, even a small herb patch. He took pride in it by all accounts. Sir Henry leaned back, his mind turning over the possibilities. Let's consider the timeline again. Mrs. Bates is in the kitchen from 3, cooking the curry. She steps out at 6 for parsley. Tom is seen near the kitchen door at 6:30 with a basket. Lily hears a rustle in the passage around 7 before serving the meal. Dinner is at 7:30, symptoms by 8:15, death before 9. The poison had to be added between 3 and 7:30, likely closer to serving to avoid Mrs. Bates tasting it. Joyce frowned, her sketch pad now filled with images of a garden path and a kitchen door. That points to Tom, doesn't it? He's the only one near the kitchen when Mrs. Bates is out. Not necessarily, Mr. Petherick said. Charles could have left his study. Lily said she heard him moving papers at 6, but that doesn't mean he stayed there. The study is across the hall from the kitchen passage. Miss Marple's needles clicked softly. A hall is such a busy place, she said. In St. Mary Mead, our vicar's wife once saw a visitor slip into a room he shouldn't have, simply because the hall was empty for a moment. One wonders what Charles was truly doing. Dr. Haydock raised an eyebrow. You think Charles snuck into the kitchen? I think, Miss Marple said, that we must consider every possibility. A man with a motive, money, a mistress, a threatened will, might take a chance. But a poison requires care, and care requires time. Sir Henry nodded. Which brings us back to the poison itself. The symptoms, rapid pulse, convulsions, collapse, suggest something fast-acting. Digitalis from foxglove, fits. It can mimic heart failure, especially in small doses, and might not show in standard tests. Dr. Haydock frowned. The chemist in London tested for common poisons, arsenic, strychnine, cyanide. Digitalis wasn't specifically checked, as it's less common. But you're right, it could explain the symptoms. Joyce's pencil paused. How would you get digitalis into a curry? Ground leaves? A liquid? Ground leaves would be simplest, Sir Henry said. Dried, powdered, and mixed into a spice jar. The curry's flavor would hide it, and a small amount could be lethal. Miss Marple tilted her head, her eyes distant. In St. Mary Mead, a young woman once ground dried herbs in a mortar for her tea. She thought it harmless, but the dust lingered on her fingers. A pinch of something, added to a jar, might go unnoticed. Dr. Haydock leaned forward, intrigued. You're suggesting someone tampered with the spice jar after it was opened? Or before, Miss Marple said softly. A delivery is so easily intercepted. A jar opened, a powder added, a lid replaced. Who would notice? Mr. Petherick adjusted his spectacles. But the supplier was cleared, and Mrs. Bates opened the jar herself. And yet, Miss Marple said, a jar is so vulnerable. In St. Mary Mead, our postman once delivered a package that had been tampered with. No one suspected until it was too late. Sir Henry turned to Dr. Haydock. What about the rest of the kitchen? Anything else that could have been tampered with? The police checked everything, Dr. Haydock said. The pot, the utensils, the coconut milk, the cream, all clean. The only anomaly was Lily's rustle in the passage, and that led nowhere. Joyce grinned, sketching a shadowy passage. That rustle bothers me. Lily heard something but saw nothing. What if someone was there, just out of sight? Miss Marple's needles clicked softly. A maid's ears are sharp, but her courage may not be. In St. Mary Mead, our parlor maid once heard a noise she couldn't explain. She said nothing, for fear of being thought foolish. Lily may know more than she dares tell. Sir Henry nodded. We need to press Lily's story, and Tom's. That basket and his vagueness are too convenient. Dr. Haydock rubbed his hands together. I can ask around in Much Benham. The police may have missed something. A neighbor, a delivery boy, someone who saw more than they said. Raymond leaned forward, his eyes gleaming. And Clara Vance. Don't forget her. If Charles was planning a future with her, she might know something, maybe even helped. Joyce shook her head. That's a leap. She's not in the house, and poison is so personal. Miss Marple's eyes twinkled. Personal, yes, but secrets are shared in whispers, Joyce. A mistress might know a man's plans, even if she doesn't act. Sir Henry leaned back, his mind turning over the details. Let's summarize. The curry is the likely vehicle, poisoned after Mrs. Bates's last taste, between 6 and 7:30. Tom is near the kitchen at 6:30 with a basket. Lily hears a rustle around 7. Charles claims to be in his study, but could have moved. The poison, possibly digitalis, is undetectable in standard tests. The garden is the key, untouched by the police and Tom's domain. Mr. Petherick frowned. But we still lack a clear link. Why would Tom act? Money from Charles? A grudge we don't know? Miss Marple's needles moved steadily. Motives are like roots, Mr. Petherick. They lie hidden until you dig. A gardener might act for many reasons. A debt, a slight, a promise. Dr. Haydock smiled faintly. You're closing in, Miss Marple. I'll see what I can find about the garden and Tom's past. There may be a clue in Much Benham yet. Joyce grinned, her sketchpad now filled with images of foxglove and shadowy figures. And I'll keep drawing. Maybe I'll catch the truth in a line. Mr. Petherick adjusted his spectacles. I'll look into Charles's investments and any correspondence with Clara Vance. There may be letters. Miss Marple's knitting continued, a steady anchor in the swirl of speculation. And I shall think, she said softly. People are so like my neighbors in St. Mary Mead. Their actions repeat, only the gardens change. The fire's soft crackle filled the silence as the Tuesday night club delved deeper into the mystery. The curry, the garden, the rustle in the passage. Each was a piece of a puzzle that refused to fit. Charles's motives were clear, but his access was uncertain. Mrs. Bates's absence opened a door. Lily's nerves hinted at unseen truths, and Tom's basket cast a shadow over the garden. Miss Marple, with her quiet wisdom and her eye for the small human details, knew the answer lay in the spaces where trust faltered and secrets grew. Chapter 7. The Truth Unraveled. The fire in Miss Jane Marple's drawing room had settled into a gentle glow, its embers casting a soft, flickering light across the faces of the Tuesday night club. The air was heavy with the weight of a mystery on the cusp of resolution. Each member of the group, Raymond West, Joyce Lempriere, Sir Henry Clithering, Mr. Petherick, and Dr. Haydock, leaning forward, their eyes fixed on the slight, white-haired figure in the armchair. Miss Marple's knitting needles rested in her lap, her hands still for the first time that evening, as if the rhythm of her thoughts had outpaced the need for wool and yarn. Her mild blue eyes, sharp with insight, held a quiet certainty that signaled the unraveling of the puzzle. Sir Henry Clithering, his Scotland Yard instincts honed by years of untangling crimes, broke the silence with a voice that carried both anticipation and respect. You've been very quiet, Miss Marple. We've dissected the scene, the motives, the opportunities. But I suspect you've seen something we've missed. What's your solution to this Much Benham mystery? Miss Marple smiled faintly, her expression as serene as a village pond, yet her words carried the weight of conviction. It's a simple matter, really. when one looks at it clearly. People are so like my neighbors in St. Mary, Mead, predictable in their passions and their mistakes. Mrs. Eleanor Rhodes died because someone wanted her gone, and they used the one dish she alone would eat, her beloved curry. But the truth lies not in the grand gestures, but in the small ones, the kind we overlook because they seem so ordinary. Raymond West, his writer's flair for drama undimmed, grinned. "You've got a theory, Aunt Jane. Out with it. Who poisoned the curry and how?" Miss Marple's eyes twinkled, but she raised a hand, gentle yet firm. "Patience, Raymond. Let us walk through it step by step, as one does when untangling a skein of wool. The curry, as we know, was the vehicle. Mrs. Rhodes ate it, and within an hour she was dead. The symptoms, rapid pulse, convulsions, collapse, point to a poison that mimics heart failure, yet leaves no trace in standard tests. The police found nothing in the spices, the pot, or the house. But there is one place they did not look closely: the garden. Joyce Lempriere, her pencil poised over a sketch-pad now filled with images of foxglove and shadowy figures, leaned forward. "You're thinking of a plant, aren't you? Something like digitalis?" "Precisely," Miss Marple said, her voice soft but clear. "Digitalis, from the foxglove plant, is a poison that can stop a heart and leave little trace, especially if the tests are not specific. It grows easily in an English garden, often among roses or delphiniums, and its leaves, when dried and ground, can be slipped into a dish as easily as a pinch of spice. The curry, with its strong flavors, would mask any bitterness, and a small dose would be enough to kill." Sir Henry nodded, his mind racing. "Foxglove fits the symptoms perfectly, but who administered it? Charles, with his motive of money and a mistress, or Tom, the gardener, who was near the kitchen?" Miss Marple tilted her head, her expression thoughtful. "Let us consider the household. Charles Rhodes had the strongest motive: Eleanor's fortune, which kept his debts at bay, and the threat that she might change her will, perhaps because of his affair with Miss Clara Vance. He was a charming man, clever enough to learn what he needed: a book, a conversation, a question to the right person. Knowledge is not so hard to come by. But Charles was in his study, or so he claims, and the kitchen was Mrs. Bates's domain. To tamper with the curry, he would have needed to cross the hall unseen by Lily and act in the brief moment Mrs. Bates was out. Mr. Petherick, his solicitor's mind attuned to evidence, adjusted his spectacles. "That's a tall order. Lily was in the passage, setting the table, and Charles is no chemist. How would he prepare digitalis?" Miss Marple's lips pursed slightly. "He need not be a chemist. In St. Mary Mead, a young man once learned to distill herbs from an old almanac. Charles could have done the same, or he could have had help. Let us turn to the others. Mrs. Bates, the cook, was loyal to Eleanor, and her grief was genuine. She prepared the curry, tasted it, and noticed nothing amiss. Her brief absence to fetch parsley left the kitchen unguarded, but she had no reason to harm her mistress. Lily, the maid, was nervous, perhaps because she saw or heard something she feared to admit. Her rustle in the passage is curious, but she is too timid to act alone." Joyce frowned, her sketch-pad resting in her lap. "That leaves Tom, the gardener. He was seen near the kitchen door with a basket at 6:30. Could he have slipped in?" Miss Marple nodded slowly. "Tom is the key, but not in the way you might think. A gardener knows his plants: foxglove, aconite, even deadly nightshade. He could prepare a powder from dried leaves, perhaps in his cottage or a shed, away from prying eyes. But why would he act? He had no apparent motive, no grudge against Eleanor, no gain from her death. Yet his vagueness, his basket, his presence near the kitchen, they point to involvement. Dr. Haydock leaned forward, his ruddy face alight with interest. You're suggesting Tom was involved, but not the mastermind? Exactly, Miss Marple said, her voice calm but firm. In St. Mary Mead, we had a case where a young man acted for another, paid to do a deed he didn't fully understand. Tom, I believe, was Charles's instrument. Charles, with his debts and his mistress, needed Eleanor gone before she could change her will. He could not act directly, too risky with Lily and Mrs. Bates about, but Tom, a loner with access to the garden, could be persuaded. A sum of money, a promise of security. Such things sway a man who lives quietly. Sir Henry's eyes narrowed. You think Charles paid Tom to poison the curry? Miss Marple's needles remained still, her hands folded in her lap. I think Charles learned of foxglove, perhaps from a book in his study, or a conversation with a chemist friend. He knew Eleanor's love for curry, a dish he never touched. He could have instructed Tom to gather foxglove leaves, dry them, and grind them into a fine powder. Tom, with his basket, was seen near the kitchen door when Mrs. Bates stepped out for parsley. A moment was all he needed to slip into the kitchen, open a spice jar, perhaps the new curry powder, and add a pinch of digitalis. The jar was closed, the powder blended with the spices, and Mrs. Bates, unsuspecting, used it in her curry. The flavor masked the poison, and Eleanor, eating heartily, took a fatal dose. Joyce's pencil froze, her eyes wide. That's brilliant. The police didn't test for digitalis, and the garden was never searched. Tom could have destroyed any evidence in his cottage. Mr. Petherick frowned, his legal mind probing for flaws. It's plausible, but there's no proof. No powder was found, no payment traced. And why would Tom agree? Miss Marple smiled faintly. Motives are simple when you see them. Tom was a loner, perhaps in need of money for his own reasons. A debt, a dream, a quiet life elsewhere. Charles, with his charm, could offer enough to sway him. As for proof, the police were careless. They overlooked the garden where foxglove might still grow among the roses. They didn't press Lily, who heard that rustle in the passage, perhaps Tom, leaving the kitchen after his task. And they didn't search Tom's cottage thoroughly. A mortar, a trace of leaves, a hidden payment. They missed it all. Sir Henry leaned back, his mind racing. Digitalis explains the symptoms, heart failure, no trace in standard tests, and the curry's spices would hide the taste. But how did Charles convince Tom without leaving a trail? Miss Marple's eyes twinkled. In St. Mary Mead, a gentleman once persuaded a servant with a promise, not a letter. A quiet word, a handshake, a few pounds slipped in a basket. Such things leave no trace. Charles is a merchant, skilled in persuasion. He could have spoken to Tom in the garden, away from ears, and arranged it all. Dr. Haydock rubbed his hands together, a spark of admiration in his eyes. You've painted a picture, Miss Marple. Charles plans it, Tom executes it, and the curry delivers it. But what about Lily's nerves? Was she involved? Miss Marple shook her head. Lily, I think, is innocent, but frightened. She heard the rustle, perhaps saw Tom near the kitchen, and sensed something wrong. A young maid in a grand house. She would fear speaking out, especially against her master or a man like Tom, who might intimidate her. Her tears were fear, not guilt. Raymond West grinned, his writer's imagination captivated. It's a perfect plot, Aunt Jane. Charles, the scheming husband, uses Tom, the silent gardener, to poison his wife's favorite dish. The police miss the garden, the poison, everything. But how do we prove it? Miss Marple's expression remained serene. Proof is for the police, Raymond, and they must be guided. I would suggest, Doctor Haydock, that you speak to your botanist friend in Danemouth. Ask what grows in the Rhodes Hall garden. Foxglove, perhaps, tucked among the flowers. Then, have the police search Tom's cottage, not just the sheds, but the hearth, the corners, where a man might hide a mortar or a scrap of dried leaves. And speak to Lily again, gently. A kind word might coax out what she saw or heard. Sir Henry nodded, his detective's instincts satisfied. It fits. The motive, the means, the opportunity. All there. Charles orchestrates, Tom delivers, and the curry conceals. The garden's the key. They should have dug deeper. Joyce's sketchpad now bore an image of a foxglove plant, its tall spikes ominous in the firelight. I wish I could draw the moment Tom slipped that powder into the jar. It's so sinister. Miss Marple smiled faintly. Sinister, yes, but so human. People act out of greed, fear, love, and they think they're clever. But they leave traces, small ones, like a rustle in a passage, a basket in a garden, a plant that shouldn't be there. Mr. Petherick adjusted his spectacles, his tone still cautious. It's a compelling theory, but without evidence. It's just that, a theory. The police need something tangible. Miss Marple's eyes gleamed. They will find it, Mr. Petherick, if they look in the right place. A garden holds secrets, and a man like Tom, however quiet, cannot hide them all. A trace of powder, a hidden payment, a word from Lily. It will come to light. Dr. Haydock leaned back, a smile spreading across his face. You've done it again, Miss Marple. I'll pass this on to Inspector Druitt. He'll grumble, but he'll search the garden and Tom's cottage, and I'll speak to Lily myself. She trusts me. Sir Henry chuckled. You're a marvel, Miss Marple. You see what we miss, the human heart, the small mistakes. I'd wager foxglove is growing at Rhodes Hall as we speak. Miss Marple resumed her knitting, the needles clicking softly once more. People are like stitches, Sir Henry. Pull one, and the pattern unravels. Charles thought himself clever, but he forgot how easily a garden betrays its keeper. The room fell silent. The fire's crackle the only sound as the Tuesday night club absorbed Miss Marple's solution. The mystery of Mrs. Rhodes's death, so baffling at the start, had been laid bare by the quiet spinster's insight. Charles Rhodes, driven by greed and fear, had used the gardener Tom to deliver a deadly dose of digitalis hidden in a curry only his wife would eat. The police had missed the garden, the poison, the truth, but Miss Marple, with her knack for seeing the patterns of human nature, had not. Joyce broke the silence, her voice tinged with awe. I'll sketch that garden tomorrow, foxglove among the roses. It's almost poetic. Raymond grinned. It's a novel, Joyce. The Merchant's Gambit, I'll call it. Aunt Jane, you're my muse. Miss Marple shook her head, her smile gentle. Nonsense, Raymond. I only see what is there. People are so careless with their secrets. Dr. Haydock rose, stretching his hands toward the fire. I'll follow up with the inspector and my botanist friend. If there's foxglove at Rhodes Hall or a trace of powder in Tom's cottage, we'll find it. Sir Henry nodded. And I'll have a word with a colleague at the yard. A second look at the case, with Miss Marple's theory, might shake something loose. Mr. Petherick adjusted his spectacles one last time. I'll check the solicitor's records in Danemouth. If Eleanor was planning to change her will, there may be notes to confirm it. Miss Marple's needles moved steadily, a quiet anchor in the room's fading tension. "And I shall stay here," she said softly, "and think of St. Mary Mead. People are the same everywhere. Their greed, their fears, their small mistakes. They weave their own downfall." The fire crackled softly, its light dancing across the drawing room as the Tuesday night club dispersed, each member carrying a piece of the solution. The mystery of Rhodes Hall, with its poisoned curry and hidden garden, had been unraveled by Miss Marple's quiet wisdom. Charles and Tom, bound by a secret pact, had thought themselves safe, but the truth, like a foxglove in bloom, could not stay hidden forever.